You could argue 2023 has been one of the best years in gaming, and you wouldn't be wrong because we've had amazing games such as Hogwarts Legacy, Street Fighter, Sea of Stars, Alan Wake 2, Hi-Fi Rush, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and Baulders Gate 3. But we've also seen massive layoffs with Epic letting go of 830 employees, Unity at 600, Bungie at 100, and EA at 600, totaling over 6,000 plus jobs lost in 2023. So the question is, with a successful year under its belt, why are these layoffs happening? The surface level answer most people would give you is corporations want more profits on top of the ones they already have, and no one would dispute that. It makes perfect sense by design. But things are really that simple, so I reached out to Joe, aka Game Over 30 from Twitter, to see if he can make it make sense. Given his corporate background, I figured he was the best person to talk to about this issue. Let's go. Is that the case? Is corporations bad? Or is there a deeper story going on here?
To get the bigger picture, you have to look back over the past several years and, largely through the COVID years, all the way back to, 2019, where the industry was. As you're probably well aware, during the pandemic years, gaming hit like an all-time high, right? Everybody's stuck inside. A lot of people are picking up gaming who have never gamed before. And the general sense that I get from watching the hiring patterns and projects that were greenlit and stuff during the COVID years is that the medium and larger game entities generally saw an opportunity to fill roles, to start new projects, and to kind of do some of the things that they've been wanting to do for years, but never really had the groundswell of revenue to do. And I remember watching a lot of these hiring sprees and projects and stuff get greenlit during the, especially 2020, 2021, maybe even as late as 2022, and thinking to myself, these are bubble years. Anybody looking at the games economy, at least from a layman's perspective, would consider that it was a high point in the games industry. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is going to level out. We're going to return to 2019 levels of investment, levels of revenue. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. I think there was a lot of pie in the sky, a lot of very overly positive leadership in the games industry at the time. The leadership, I mean, referring to like executives and corporate managers and stuff who thought, okay, this is my opportunity to greenlight this project. This is my opportunity to hire 200, 300, 400 people. And it just, as the games economy leveled out coming into 2022 and 2023, that number, the people added to the bottom line. Because I mean, something that I find very interesting about this stuff is a lot of people are like, well, what about why are costs and stuff so high? Most of the cost of these game companies comes from labor. That's it. It's not licenses. It's not technology. It's not paying the mocap studio to do mocap. It's labor. It's your developers and your artists and your people that are running the esports and your people that are maybe doing social media or QA testing, right? That's the biggest cost in the games industry. And when the games industry leveled out, revenue started to dip back down. In the last couple of years, they suddenly realized that groundswell of labor was just too much for the bottom line, and that cost swell was cutting into revenue to the point where it was unsustainable. So I guess if somebody wants to be subjective and say like, well, there's two ways to look at it. One, they got overly aggressive and shouldn't have hired as they did during the pandemic years. But two, at the same time, this mistake happens across the world all the time during groundswells of revenue. Companies overhire. You have to fix that bottom line, and the only way that's going to come out a lot of these companies is by cutting labor, which is extremely unfortunate. I've been there. It's not something to be glad about. It's just a really tough situation.
And I guess another take I've seen, actually, because you're right, you're spot on about the labor issues, the labor problem. But one take that I've seen online a little bit is this idea that, well, why don't the CEOs and the leadership take a huge pay cut? Does that actually have an effect on things, or is that just, no, it does minimum at this moment? It's not going to change anything whatsoever.
I like that question because you're right. It comes up a lot, especially because there's this, I think there was one situation several years ago when Nintendo wasn't doing well, that their CEO took like a 50% pay cut or something.
What I believe, yeah.
And it was, and I don't remember what year that was, but they were like, well, we're not doing well, so the CEO's taking a pay cut. The numbers when it comes to that idea, right? And I have seen that, like you said, I've seen that posted several times before, like where's the CEO cut? Why do they still have a job? When it comes to the numbers that a CEO could cut within their own salary, which is usually within these publicly traded companies. So when we talk about something like an EA or a Take-Two, at least within the publicly traded companies, the salaries and compensation they are given are generally not impactful on a company's cash flow. And that's probably the biggest thing that somebody needs to be aware of, that you can't, like, even if a CEO were to go, okay, you know what, because we did so bad this year, we had to lay all these people off, I'm going to take a 50% salary cut. Well, some of these CEOs quite literally make $1 a year in salary. The rest of their compensation is stock and miscellaneous bonuses, and it's not where it counts, which is cash flow. And where you have to fix the problem is, if your company is bleeding cash every quarter, is you have to fix the bottom line cash flow, which generally speaking, and this is extremely unfortunate, comes right from your labor cost.
And I've also heard this take before, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that, and you might be able to speak to this, that investors generally don't even care, or they're not actually happy if a CEO takes off some of his salary. That what they actually just want to see is just structural changes, and anything to do with the CEO, his salary, whatever it is, just strictly comes down to trying to appease the employees or trying to appease the consumer. But once again, it's completely irrelevant. Investors would primarily prefer if you just fix the problem.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, that's, if you wanted to look at it from just the investor perspective, that's exactly right. Is that generally speaking, in fact, if you recall, it was like I don't remember when it was, but the EA executives actually did take a bonus reduction several years ago in response to some challenges they were having into the business. And the fact that I think investors at the time thought that their bonus level and their compensation was a little out of whack. So a lot of the executives at EA actually took a symbolic cut, and that's generally what it is. Like, I hate to put it in those terms, but that's generally what it is. But when investors are looking at the company, they're really, especially if they have experienced leadership, they're not looking for that leadership to say, I should, remove my own compensation and just, take the punishment myself. They're looking for that leadership, whether you like them or not. I guess I'm trying to be non-subjective here. They're looking for that leadership, say like an Andrew Wilson or their CFO or something along those lines at EA, to say, this is what we're doing about our cost problem. Or if you take a look at Take-Two, who, is kind of in a little bit of a hole right now, obviously GTA 6 is on the horizon, but they're looking for that leadership not to, for lack of a better term, beat themselves up over, but they're looking for them to come back to investors and say, this is what we're doing about our cash flow problem.
Yeah.